Hello and welcome to another episode of BW Marketing World's new interview series in partnership with Kaizen, BW Marcom Power Talks, conversations that drive the next big moves. This is the series where I talk to corporate communications and marketing captains about the latest trends, the changing role of communication leaders, and new gen strategies, and a lot more. For today's episode, I'm joined by Ms. Rachana Panda, who is the VP and Head of Cluster Communications for South Asia, ASEAN, and Australia, New Zealand at Bayer. Welcome, Ms. Panda. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Resham. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
In today's age where corporate reputation can be shaped or shattered within moments, the role of corporate communications have evolved far beyond traditional messaging. Today, it is strategic function that not only crafts narratives but also influences policies, drive business growth, navigates the complexities of public perception. Uh, as regulatory landscapes tighten and stakeholder expectations rise, how should organizations adapt their communication strategies to stay ahead? In today's episode, we will uncover how strategies have evolved over the years, what is new that we can expect from this segment, and also how the geopolitics and the regulatory landscape, how is it evolving and how is it impacting the different facets of it. Now, Ms. Panda, I understand and I know that you have been in different sectors. You have worked with multinationals and different companies in different sectors. In your observation over the years, how traditional communication strategies have evolved over the years? Talk about some of the latest trend that you must have observed in the last 2 to 3 years.
Thanks, Resham. I think communications is a very strategic function, as you rightly said. But the way I would define it is we are in the business of trust. We build trust across different stakeholders, whether it is external or internal. So the business of trust or the process of building trust has only become difficult as we've moved across, in so many decades. And in my 30 years, 3 decades that I've been working, I think it's only become tougher. Trust is dwindling across different institutions in businesses, in governments, in various institutions. Thankfully, in India, we're still a little stable. I wouldn't say very good, but yeah, still stable. The trust on the government is still quite stable. And I refer to the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is in the 25th year of its barometer results. And I really follow that quite well. And today is a day, I think, where trust is at its minimal across the world. And we see the situation across the world in terms of governments, in terms of different geopolitics, in terms of the wars that we have. We have a huge issue at hand in terms of building trust. And when I say we, it doesn't mean just the businesses, but all the institutions need to work together, right? And there are huge grievances amongst different demographic, different parts of the world, different genders. So much is going on at the moment, and these must be addressed together, right? And businesses have a license to act and a license to operate, which in different markets, and but they cannot work alone. Everybody has to put their hands together, whether it's the media, whether it's the NGOs and institutions, wherever we need to work with the government. I think trust and optimism is the only way that we can overpower grievances. And I think that's critical. To your point on communications teams are enablers. We are the pulse of the organization, whether it's external or internal, and we have a responsibility to be able to put this back into the system, saying, this is the direction, this is where we need to put our efforts, this is where the issue or crisis can come over to bother the businesses, and also encourage our leaders, encourage teams and organizations to be authentic, to be honest, to be able to look at the society while we do business, but we also look at, our societal engagement. I think there's a huge role that communicators have within the organization and even externally. As you rightly said, how do we become advocates of change? How do we influence policies? how do we ensure that the connect between the businesses and the government and the NGOs and advocates, all of this get together. I think it's a huge responsibility, and it's only become tougher with fake news, with misinformation, with so many channels. But one thing which runs across is simplicity and authenticity.
Uncertainty, this is the most critical aspect of it. Now, in an era where we're seeing increasing regulatory scrutiny, we're also seeing stakeholder capitalism gaining momentum. Now, suggest some actionable strategies where corporate communications and public affairs and societal expectations can really align well, not just for the sake of compliance or let's say a tick mark checkbox, but how will it be able to also drive business growth, drive innovation, and help build the narrative?
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, in today's landscape of misinformation, comms, the communications teams have to be proactive, right? The approach needs to be before the content goes public, right? Also, credibility should be built on very consistent and clear communication, training the teams to recognize these biases, working with different functions like the legal function, the IT function, ensuring that we have trusted, channels across to be able to, disseminate this information. Monitoring tools have to be in place which can track the digital platforms. Also, I would say, to the last point on authenticity and honesty should be something which is always trending and should be prioritized in a public facing message. So that's something I would say in terms of content. But in terms of educating employees, that's something I think most of us are in organizations which have regular mandatory training programs and mock phishing tests, which train employees in identifying these, some of these issues. Google is one example that we see that they do this in terms of managing privacy, data privacy to a great extent. And lastly, I would say a protocol for identifying, reporting data breaches is something that will help in minimizing reputational risks.
I mean, while you're mentioning about risks, we must talk about how reputation management and strategy behind crisis management has been evolving. Now, the speed of information flow means brands don't really get even a second chance at first impression. Now, internal communications often play a crucial role in crisis response. How do they respond? Well, the alignment between different teams inside the company. I mean, how corporate communications is really aligned with compliance team, or let's say public affairs team, or let's say sustainability team. How should leaders approach crisis communication beyond the standard playbook? We understand that transparency, authenticity, these are some of the traditional things that cannot be missed at all. But I mean, given your experience in high stakes industries, what are some of the biggest gaps in how organizations prepare for crisis today? Talk about those.
Yeah. Crisis is not a matter of if, but preparedness is the key. In most organizations, we have a playbook. In the organizations I've worked, particularly in Bayer, we have a clear playbook, and collaboration is the key. Two things that I always say when it comes to crisis: pink flags are more important than red flags. When you see that something is coming, and most of the times, whether it's monitoring, whether it's the business teams or the commercial teams or the external facing functions, we do get a little bit of a hint saying somewhere something is coming up. I think that's where the businesses, the teams come together. In most of the organizations, we have an SOP in place or there is a crisis team, which consists of the internal or the business teams, the HR, depending on the type of crisis, the public affairs teams. And I've been in the public affairs side, so, a lot of value they bring into the table. Communications team, the media, particularly from the communications team, the media teams, and of course, there's the internal piece in terms of internal communication, right? But what is important, as I said, one is the pink flag before it becomes an issue, I think it's important to be able to catch it. So the monitoring tools have to be in place. The second thing is a lot of times we engage externally only after when a crisis happens. In a crisis, environment, to be prepared, we should always be engaged with our stakeholders much before any issue or a crisis crops up, so that if something is up, then we're able to talk it out, to communicate, to work very, very fast, particularly with our customers or external stakeholders. I think that is paramount. Third, I would say, is training, right? A media training, refresher training with our spokespersons, mock trainings with relevant teams, whether it's the manufacturing team or commercial teams or even other teams. That's very critical. And the last point is speed and accuracy, which is the 0 hour, right? We no time should be lost in terms of thinking what's next. We should have a standard operating protocol, a crisis management tool. And lastly is post-crisis review. Every crisis is a learning experience, and we should be able to learn something from each of these, and that should help us in our next crisis. Hopefully it doesn't come up again and again.
Very helpful, Ms. Panda. Now, you have worked closely with many top leaders across industries. You mentioned about training. How do you coach leaders to be authentic, to be proactive communicators? I mean, in today's times, we see, because I told you that I primarily cover startups, and I see entrepreneurs go all out about the brands, be it the good instance, be it advocating for it, or even a crisis, right? In companies like you, the leaders of the sectors, you've worked with top leaders, CXOs across the industries. How do you coach leaders to be authentic, to be a good proactive communicators and advocates for their companies? Talk about that.
Yeah, maybe I was a little lucky on this one, that I've always got to work with people, with leaders who've been fantastic communicators, and that makes my life a little more easier, or maybe any communicator, I would say. But yes, there have been times where that we had to, coach, instill confidence to be, to the new leaders who sometimes are a little wary of speaking out in the media, right? It's not always easy, and in country like us, uh, facing the media is not always, the easy part of the job. But I think the first thing I would say, right, like I said, prepare well. And the role of a communicator is also very important, to be able to help the leader gain confidence, prepare, do media training, sensitization programs, refresher with them. Also, sometimes put them in a spot to be able to pick up, their skills and their strengths there. But most leaders pick this up very well, and I've been lucky to work with them. And a lot of times I have learned from these leaders as well, right? Some of them have been fantastic. And I've, as a communicator, learned, particularly during the crisis times, how, we have to be calm, how we can, instead of reacting, we think through, we respond, we are preparing enough. We connect the dots within the organization. A lot of times when speaking to the media, I've seen leaders connect to different functions and businesses to be able to get the latest data, right? And not just hope for something, the old data to be, helping them in that interview. That's one. Second, I think it's also a lot to do with their exposure. Sometimes it's not always, we don't always put them in the media at the first go, but we let them go speak externally, understand how the environment is. We give them a little, the new leaders, we give them time to, adjust and settle in the roles for some time, so that they understand the business, the nuances, become members of industry forums to understand what's going on in the industry, and have a point of view. That is very, very important. Have a point of view and not be afraid to talk it out, and also discuss. It's okay to take feedback. Sometimes we are human beings, we do errors, but it's okay to learn, move on. And I always say to the leaders, it's okay to apologize or say a sorry when we've done something wrong. right? I think the public, the readers, the viewers understand that, we go wrong, but it's to own this up fast and in the right manner with the right empathy is extremely important. But to that point on, leaders, I think I have learned more from my leaders than I would have really being able to counsel them.
Yes, I can imagine. I can imagine. Must be. And now, in line with this, we're talking about how leadership is evolving. Talk about how role of communication leader is evolving. I mean, I am 100% sure it must be way, way, way different from when you started. And how was it 3 decades ago, and how is it today? How is it the role of communications leader evolved now with the different functions being aligned with corporate leader? Uh, I mean, in today's world, media is functioning differently. You have different mediums to handle. How is the role evolving?
I think the role is very interesting. If there is one function which is evolving the fastest, I personally think it's marketing and communications. Whether we call it Corpcom or Marcom or any part of communication, but this is a function which is evolving really, really fast because it is external facing. And there's so many channels. When I started, it was maybe a press release and a newsletter which was printed. It had different challenges, of course, but now everything's digitized. So we as communicators also need to move faster than, in terms of our learning, in terms of understanding. And a lot of times I have to go back to my reverse mentors, to the young people in the team who mentor me, to ask a lot of questions. So the role of any leader today is to ask more questions than to answer.
Very
Right?
beautifully put. Yeah, very beautifully put. Now, as you mentioned, you are very passionate about sustainability. Now, many companies really struggle with walking the talk on sustainability. We're listening a lot of dialogue happening, a lot of discussions happening, but what about walking the talk? How can communications leaders ensure sustainability messaging is credible and ensure that it's just not greenwashing around? How do you, I mean, because you are a strong advocate for it, you passionately work about it, but tell me, how can you ensure that it's just not the conversation only?
Yeah, I think most of the organizations that I've worked through with have been very purposeful. And particularly, let me talk about a little about Bayer here. When I joined Bayer, the one thing that really intrigued me was the vision: health for all, hunger for none. Right? It is a very powerful, very simple vision which is put out, and we're in the business of life sciences, which is agriculture, pharma, and consumer health. So it's nutrition and health, right? And we've seen very, very stringent global mandates on sustainability, reaching out to 100 million farmers, smallholder farmers across in different markets, reaching out to 100 million women across low and medium income countries, on self-care and family planning. So very stringent mandates, which are broken up and given to the different markets to be able to pursue these, right? So when you have very, very simple targets given, it is very easy to be able to follow and understand the strategy, right? And now in the markets, in different businesses, we see this being picked up extremely well, whether it's in agriculture, building up agri-entrepreneurs, building up, water resilient crops, building up, use of renewable power for the businesses, or societal engagement. I personally lead the Bar Foundation in India, which is into societal engagement. And I see the type of work that the team does on women empowerment, livelihood, working with water. Yesterday, we inaugurated one of our iGel stations in the remotest of locations. We are planning to do around 90 of them across the country, which will cater to, in and around communities on drinking water, accessible water. It's sustainable because the self-help group, the women self-help groups are going to be managing that. And the operator, the management, the entire thing is managed by women. right? Also, we do a lot of programs around women education and science education. We support women-led FPOs, farmer producer organization, which have become defunct, now coming back into profitability. We also work around women's health. So I am very passionate about it, and it's not about just doing it, but also ensuring the community is involved. It is sustainable. We've had telemedicine centers focused on NCDs, breast cancer detection, by visually challenged women who did not have any livelihood, now visually challenged women, detecting breast cancer, training them. I think it works both ways, whether it's for rural women or whether it is for women who were challenged and yet have a livelihood now. So it's lot of this is not done just for the tick box, but it is because it is purposeful. And we involve the community, we involve the volunteers, we involve the employees to have a feel of this. We report it out. A lot of these are reported out in the BRSR plus the CSR reports. And we invite a lot of external people to come and engage with us to be able to support and also experience this. Right. So you can see that I'm extremely passionate about this. It's, something which drives me at this stage of life, I guess. It's the motivation is slightly different, but yes, it is. And as communicators to that point, I think we have an obligation, a moral obligation, plus a responsibility to ensure what the organization does is authentic. And, once it is authentic, once you see that they're walking the talk, I think the communication just flows.
Very interesting, and I wish you all the very best for all your purpose-driven actions and plans. Just the final question of our conversation, given your 3-decade-long experience in the industry, what are some of the learnings you would want to share from a broader perspective, and what would be one piece of advice you would want to give to younger professionals?
These days I'm taking more advice from the younger professionals than giving them. But if I have to give one thing, I would say, keep it simple, keep it authentic, and be humble. I think if these three things are there with any communicator, I think it is easier because we represent the organizations externally. The way we behave, the way we communicate, the way we approach things or issues, how we work with our agencies, how we work with external stakeholders, talks a lot about who are we representing. So keep it simple. Simplicity never goes out of fashion. Authenticity brings in trust, and collaborate with the right people, and just be humble.
Interesting. I mean, this has been a very insightful conversation. Thank you so much for making time for this, Ms. Panda. I am looking forward to more such dialogues. And thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you, Resham. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Likewise. Take care. Bye bye.